Good morning, everyone. We're expecting about 100 people, and so we're going to wait for just a minute to let everybody get in, but then we're going to start right away. We have a lot of information to cover, and I want to make sure we get through all of it and also have time for your questions. So as we're getting started here, if you can all put into the chat yourselves, your organization, the county you're coming from, and your land acknowledgement and pronouns, that would be great. Make sure that you put those kinds of things in the chat, but if your questions, if you can put those directly into the Q&A, that would be great. We're gonna hit at the very beginning, the first, some questions that have come up frequently. So if you wanna hold off for just a minute on putting your questions in, we may save you the trouble. All right, so we're gonna give this 1 minute and then we'll hit the ground running and go. Okay.
Do is because
I think somebody isn't muted. If you can all remember to mute yourselves also. All right. Okay, we're at 11:02. We have a lot of people still coming in, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to review this stuff again for those of you who have come in the last few seconds. The webinar is being recorded. The webinar, the slide deck, the Q&As that get answered, all of this is going to be available on the Californian for the Arts website. There's a program page for the nonprofit performing arts grant. You're going to go to that page and there will be links there where you can find the recording of all of the webinars we're doing, as well as the slide deck. So that will all be there. Please make sure that you keep your mics muted unless you're specifically speaking. Introduce yourself, as I said in the chat, with your name, your organization, the county you're coming from, your land acknowledgement and pronouns. Your questions specifically, please put those in the Q&A and not the chat. We will have somebody from Lindustry and also the Dance Resource Center answering questions as we go. Hang on just 1 second. We'll have people answering questions as we go. Hang on 1 second here. Let me mute. I need to adjust my speaker. Okay, technology. Sorry, I'm in a room with some other people and I had forgotten to get set up. All right, so if you can put your questions into the Q&A and not the chat, Patrice, who is here with us from Lindustry, and also Rael from Dance Resource Center will be answering questions as we go so we can try to keep up on everything. I will go through the presentation and then we'll do questions at the end. And you also notice closed captioning is activated. So you can click the transcription icon in the Zoom menu bar to utilize that. All right, let's move on to the next. Okay, now I could actually introduce myself and pretend I do have manners. I'm Terry Ball, I'm the grants manager at Californians for the Arts, and we are very pleased to be hosting this webinar here today along with the Dance Resource Center. Just as way of introduction, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming today from the unceded lands of the Chumash people. The Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates are actually two separate organizations that work together. The California Arts Advocates is an advocacy organization that lobbies for
the arts, culture industries, and workforce for programs just like this one. The Californians for the Arts is then the 501c3 service organization that helps implement and help the community work with those programs that have been fought for. For example, right now, Californians for the Arts is involved in the fight for a new initiative called SB 1116, which would be another huge help to the California arts, the California cultural workforce. And let's go to the next slide. This is a quote from the president of both CFTA and CAA. To be an effective arts advocate, we need to speak with one voice. And this is just a reminder of how incredibly important all of your voices are in these efforts. And we would like to say a big thank you to everyone who helped advocate to make this program possible and is currently advocating for the others. The arts are making progress in getting more financial support, and the only way this will happen is if we from all over the state, from all of the different cultural organizations, help let the legislators know how important this support is. I want to introduce now our friend Rael Dorfan from the Dance Resource Center in Los Angeles.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As Terry said, my name is Rael Dorfan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Dance Resource Center. The DRC is Greater LA and Southern California's local nonprofit service organization. We provide programming, resources, and opportunities to the professional dance community. So sign up for our free newsletter, LA Moves, via our website, danceresourcecenter.org, for exclusive and inclusive dance news and events in the region. We are delighted to be partnering with Californians for the Arts and Lendistry to bring you this webinar, and look forward to our constituents, you, having access to this opportunity. Without further ado, I pass the mic back to you, Terry.
Wow, you are good. Okay, so before we dive in, there's lots of different players here, so let's just cover who everybody is. Once a program like this is advocated for and passed through the legislature then assigns it to or in the legislation, it's assigned to a state organization. Let's just take a deep breath and begin again. The legislation assigns it to a state agency to oversee the program. In this case, we're talking about California's Office for the Small Business Advocate. That agency, who has the ultimate authority, then contracts with another organization, in some cases, to implement. In that case, this is our friends at Lendistry, who they have the responsibility to oversee the program and get it delivered to the public. Lendistry then reaches out to a group of partners, you can see them all listed here, to help them communicate with and reach out to the community. Understanding that every industry is not the same, they like to have a set of partners to help them communicate and make sure they're communicating effectively with the community. That's us, and that's the process we're going through now. Californians for the Arts specifically is also a technical partner, which means we're here to help you with technical questions, technical problems, not just during the application process, but also throughout the granting process until you receive your grant. So you can reach out to any of the partners or directly to us. My email address will be put into the chat. It will also be in the presentation several times. As I mentioned at the beginning, don't feel, you will get this slide deck. This is on our website, and we will also post the Q&As. A recording of this will be on the website, so don't feel like you have to write everything down, take all the pictures of the screen. Listen, take in the information. What we're going to do today is highlight things. Thank you. Sorry. Now maybe I can talk. What we're going to do is hit the highlights. Do not take this webinar as a replacement for reading the application guidelines. There is a great application guideline available that Lendistry has put together, and you want to review it. Okay, let's jump to the next. Okay, so we're going to go over the presentation and people will be answering questions in the Q&A as we go forward. And then at the end, we'll do live answering. If you have any questions, there is my email. Send them to me. It will sometimes take me a few hours to get back to you, but I'm happy to help with any questions, problems, issues that you have going along. There are, as I say, some things that I will be redundant about as we go through the process, and that's because they're important and I want you to remember them. All right, next. Right, a quick overview of the program. The California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant Program is here to provide grants to eligible nonprofit performing arts organizations, which we'll show you the definition of, to encourage workforce development. Grants for this program will be awarded on a first-come, first-served basis in specific amounts, depending upon the applicant's annual gross revenue in 2019 taxable year. Grants awarded under the section shall be only used for the following: employee expenses, including payroll costs, healthcare benefits, paid sick leave or family leave, and insurance premiums, contributions or payments to a centralized payroll service, recruitment, training, development, and other human resource related expenses, and then other operating expenses for employment for employees or equipment for employees. That is the last slide I will read to you verbatim. I just wanted to make sure that we cover the absolute nuts and bolts. For the rest of it, what I'm going to do is hit highlights and assume you will read the slides themselves later. So some important things to keep in mind. The application portal opens July 13th at 9 a.m. There are $49.5 million in grant funds. These grants are going to be reviewed on a rolling basis. Many of the previous relief grants, particularly those administered by Lindustry, there was an application period, it opened, it closed, and then the application review started. That is not how this grant will be done. The applications will continue to be accepted either until all of the money runs out, or the program legally is set to end in June of next year. Another good thing to keep in mind is this is a brand new program. That means as Lindustry goes through the process of starting to review the grants, things are going to take a little bit of time to get up to speed rolling. That just because it says that they're going to begin reviewing them immediately, no one should think they're going to see their grant funds by July 23rd after the program opens on July 13th. There is a multi-step process to review all of the grants, and it's going to take a little time. I would not think that any of these grants will be fully reviewed, awarded, and then money into your bank account before mid-August. Next. Okay, as I said, I'm going to hit some answers to very common questions before we go in more in depth. First of all, this program is available for both full 501c3 organizations, eligible organizations, also fiscally sponsored organizations. We will talk a lot about that in a minute. One common confusion with this, because the program is a workforce development, many people assume that you have to have employees. You do not. There is no part of this application process or the review process where you will have to prove that you have employees, that you have to have employees. You do not have to worry in this case about whether you're working with employees or independent contractors. All of those questions, know right up front, you do not have to have employees for this. The other thing to know is in the application, you're going to be asked some questions about employees, which I realize seems to contradict what I just said, but part of what's going on is their data gathering. With state programs like this, it's very important for the state to be able to know afterwards who is getting the money and therefore who these funds are helping, since it is their job to help the public, and the public with taxpayer dollars like to know where those monies are going. None of the questions that you are asked about the number of employees you have, the number of employees you have retained, the number of employees that this application may fund or create, None of those are part of the review process. Those are data gathering. Do not be concerned about them. Everything financially related to this grant, we are talking about your 2019 year. And the financial information is all about your 2019 990, including the $2 million threshold. This grant is for anyone who has as low as $1,000 in gross revenue in the 2019 taxable year, up to $2 million in gross revenue in the 2019 taxable year. There is no set timeline for when you have to spend this money. As not-for-profits, we're used to grants that you have a year to spend. That is not the case for this program. You also will not be asked for a budget to tell you how you plan to describe how you plan to spend the money. You must spend the money on that list of allowable resources that I mentioned earlier, but you will not be expected to write out that budget during the application process. There is no formal closeout or reporting for this grant. Remember, just because you don't have a reporting process, that does not mean you're not responsible for being able to tell the state how you spent the money if they should ever come asking. So you want to certainly retain all of your receipts and clear record keeping for how you spend these funds. One more eligibility factor is eligible organizations have to have been in operation since June 1st, 2019. So if you came into existence during COVID or sometime this year, then unfortunately you will not be eligible for this grant. There are not very many eligibility factors for this grant, but those that are pretty hard and fast. The $2 million threshold, for example, you have to be under that in 2019. Doesn't matter what your funding is now, what your gross revenue is today. What is important is what it was in 2019. For fiscally sponsored organizations, that deadline is about when your relationship with your fiscal sponsor began. So you will need to have a fiscal sponsorship agreement in place since June 1st of 2019. Next. All right, these are two forms that we've had a lot of questions about, so I wanted to show them, and I'm sorry that they're not, that they're kind of small. So the 990, the first thing that I wanted to point out is, common question is fiscal year. Everybody is going to use their 2019 tax year. So if you're on a calendar year, then that's very clear, January 1 to December 1 of 2019. What you want is your 2019 990. So if you're on a fiscal year, you will see I've highlighted here on your 990, it says for the 2019 calendar year or the tax year beginning X and ending X. So you want to find the 990 that for the fiscal year that started in 2019. The next thing that's important on your 990 that you're going to be looking to is down at line 12, your total revenue. This is not just contributed or just earned. This is your total revenue. So if you're looking for your $2 million threshold, if you're looking for what your grant amount is going to be, first piece of information, the 990, line 12, total revenue. If you're a small organization and therefore you file the 990 NE, the postcard, that does not include financial information. So for you, your financial information is going to come off of your filed RRF1 form that you file with the Attorney General each year. So that's the other copy here. So for you, if you file the 990 NE, then no, anytime we talk about you need your 990, what you're going to be looking at is this RRF1 form. And there will be some links in the chat for where you can find these forms. Although you should certainly have them within your organization. Next. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, the way that eligibility is being determined for this grant, that you are a performing arts organization, is the legislation established 4 different NAICS codes and said organizations with these 4 NAICS codes are performing arts organizations, and that's how we're determining eligibility. The problem for many not-for-profits is you may now be saying to yourself, what the heck is a NAICS code? NAICS codes are covered on some organizations' 990. The issue is they are not required on your 990, so many people don't even know that they're there. Nonprofits are much more familiar with their NTEE codes. So the state has come up with, for each NAICS code that is an eligible NAICS code, there is a list of NTEE codes that are eligible under that NAICS code. And you see those lists here. So what you're going to do, there's a place on the application that's going to ask you to fill in your NAICS code. If you happen to use the NAICS code on your 990, then that's how you know which one to select. If you don't, then you're going to look yourself up in Guidestar, see what your NTEE code is, then look to this and find out which of the NAICS codes you would use. You will see there are some NTEE codes that can fall in different ones. In that case, what you want to do is select the one where both your NTEE code is there and that best represents the work that you do. Guidestar is, if you're not familiar with Guidestar, it's a free website where you can go and look up nonprofit organizations from across the country, public information like their 990s. So go there, look up your NTEE code. If the NTEE code doesn't represent what your organization does, these are assigned originally by the IRS when you file for your not-for-profit status, and sometimes there are mistakes. You can have up to 3 NTEE codes listed. So if you go and you see that the NTEE code doesn't make sense, doesn't represent your organization, then you can contact Guidestar and work to have your NTEE code very quickly updated. I would suggest doing this now. Do not wait until the morning of the 13th to figure out what your NAICS and NTEE codes are, because then you're going to be further behind because you have to do anything to fix them. All right, next. That's really the same information. Let's go on to the next one. What I will say is I think, yes, so fiscal sponsorships. As I said, this grant is allowing fiscally sponsored organizations to apply through a fiscal sponsor. The big note on this is the first time in one of these grant programs administered by Cal OSBA that fiscally sponsored organizations have been allowed to apply. That means, in total honesty, they're still figuring some of this stuff out. Fiscally sponsored organizations is a pretty wide field, as we all know. There's lots of different kinds of organizations. It's not quite as straightforward as you're a 501c3, therefore we know X, Y, and Z about you. We know you have to file a 990. We know you have to have certain things done. So the way this is working is the fiscally sponsored organization, what we're going to call the sponsee, will not do the application. Your fiscal sponsor will complete the application, will do all communication with Lindustry. The sponsee organization will not be directly involved in the communications at all. Everything will go through the fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor has to be a 501c3, but it does not have to meet the other eligibility requirements. The eligibility requirements, being under $2 million, having the correct eligibility as a performing arts organization, those will apply to the sponsee. If the fiscal sponsor itself meets the eligibility requirements of the grant, they can apply on their own. Each application will be a separate and unique thing. So the fiscal sponsor can apply for themselves. If they are also going to apply for a sponsored organization, a sponsee, then that is a separate application. If you are going through the application and there is a piece of information that is asked for about the sponsee that doesn't exist, an EIN number, their 990, things like this, in that case, put in the fiscal sponsor's information. As I said, this is a new process. They're still figuring some things out. And so there are places in the application that it's going to ask for information that the sponsee probably doesn't have yet, just because of where they are in their evolution as an organization. One of these is when the application portal was designed, it included the requirement that you submit an STD 213. This is a form that you are not, in fact, required to submit when you apply. This is an agreement between a state agency and a contractor. So if a grant is made for a fiscal sponsee, then this is an agreement that the fiscal sponsor will sign to say to the state, yes, I will oversee this money with the sponsee and be responsible. But it is not something you have to apply at the beginning. You have to complete at the beginning. In the application process, you will just upload a PDF document that simply says, will be submitted if the grant is awarded. You have to submit something there because the system right now thinks it's a required document, and you will not be allowed to submit your application until you put something in that spot on the application. Okay, next. All right, the grants. The grants are 3 amounts and 3 amounts only. If your organization, it has 2019 gross revenue from 1,000 to 100,000, then your grant is $25,000. If it's 101,000 up to $1 million and you are awarded, your grant would be $50,000. $1,001 up to $2 million, your grant is $75,000. There are not partial grants. It is an all or nothing. You either meet the eligibility requirements and your grant is funded, this is the amount you get, or you don't, and you get nothing. In the case of the fiscal sponsor situation, there's crackling coming from your background. Okay, let's try this with
The headset. That is probably because I'm hitting my microphone. Is that better, Eddie? Okay. I will just tell the other people in the room to be quiet. All right, sorry. Thanks for letting me know. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, during the application process, there are some documents that are absolutely required, and that is what is listed here. There's also information here on, it can only be PDFs in a certain size. So read all of that detail. The important things to remember off this page, the application certification is a document that you can download ahead off of the program website. You're going to sign it. And then you can scan it as a PDF, and then you'll upload it during the application process. You can also digitally sign the document, save it as a PDF, and upload it. This is one of the things that you can do beforehand. You do not have to wait till the morning. The person that is going to sign this is the signer for the full grant. We're going to go over that in a minute, but know that that is who must sign this application certification. You also will need government issued identification. Again, this is for the signer of the grant. Proof of your tax exempt status. One of these other documents listed. You do not have to have all 4 of them. You need something that proves you have been in existence since June 1 of 2019. You're also going to need your proof of revenues. That's your 990 tax return, your 2019 tax return. And finally, for fiscally sponsored organizations, you need the fiscal sponsor agreement. This is not the complete list. This is the complete list for the application process. During the determination and review of your grant, you may be asked for some other follow-up documentation at that time by Lindustry. Let's go. Okay, next. So while we're waiting for the slide, there we go. Okay, so the signer versus the person who's probably physically filling out the application. This is one of those things where it's a little different for not-for-profits than small businesses, which is where this system really started. So the person that signs the grant, that is the signer for all of this, needs to be an officer that is listed on your statement of information for your organization. In the case of a fiscal sponsor, this will be somebody off the statement of information for the fiscal sponsors organization, not the sponsee. In most cases, the person actually filling out this grant and actually overseeing the grant, answering questions for Lindustry as we go through the program, is not going to be the signer of the grant, because that signer has to be it, because that signer is most likely either a board member or in some cases your executive director. You want to strategize who is going to be your signer, because the person who is the signer needs to physically be with you when you complete this application. In a perfect world, the signer is the person who fulfills, who would complete the application. We realize for not-for-profits that in most cases is not going to be realistic. But the best way to do this is to have that physical signer there with you when they are completing the application. As part of the application, you're going to have to set up an email and a cell phone that will be your sources of all communication about this grant. You want those to be something that the person who oversees the grant within the organization has constant access to. Every time you try to go into the portal, either as you're applying or down the line during the review process, you will need this cell phone number to be able to accept a text for verification. All communications are going to come through that phone and that email. So make sure you're very clear with what those are when you initially set up. There's a point in the application where you will upload the government ID front and back, and then there is going to be a verification utilizing the camera on your website that wants to see that the person on that government ID is the person sitting in front of the computer completing the grant. And that has to be completed before you submit your application. So as I say, beforehand, think carefully about who your signer is and who the person will be that is completing the application. It may be that you can prepare all the information and give it to the signer, and they complete the application and you're just there by the phone or something. But the signer for the ID verification has to be there at the computer. All right, let's go on. This is really the information I've been talking about. The important thing to note on this is that there are certain emails that Lindustry the Lindustry system won't work with. It will sort of flag as an attempted fraud or something. So look at these and make sure that this is not how your email is set up. The very common one that people run into trouble with is info@. So you don't want that to be your email. Okay, move on. As I said, there are documents that have to be uploaded. This is important information about those. Read the instructions, upload them accurately and correctly. Next, the big thing to keep in mind with this uploading of document is this is part of how you're making your case. This is common sense. The reviewer has to be able to read these documents. So before you upload them, once you've made the PDFs, look at them, make sure they're clear, make sure they're legible. If you don't have a scanner, use a scanner app. Don't just take a picture of these with your phone. As someone who has had to review documents, pictures taken with phone of documents in many cases are extremely difficult to read. So you want to make the life easier, not more difficult for the person who is reviewing your grant. Next. Okay, these are some very specific, helpful tips on how to prepare your computer to prepare the application and submit the application. I'm not going to go through these step by step, but I will tell you, your life is going to be happier if you do these things. If you clear your cache, use incognito mode, and disable pop-up blocker before you begin the application. This is a computer application designed to accept information from lots and lots of different computer systems. As we all know, in situations like that, things can be glitchy. The system gets confused by cookies and things like that. So read these, do these, and your life will be better on application day. Next. And then you can just skip through these until we get, and as he's going through, I will say to you again, don't you skip through them, read them. Okay, next. The application process itself. Things to do before July 13th at 9 o'clock in terms of getting ready. Number one, you want to know your 2019 and 2020 total revenue off of those respective years' 990s. You will need the physical 990 for 2019 to submit, but you also want to know your 2020 revenue because that's a question on the application. That is not part of the evaluation. That is used to help establish that your organization is still functioning. There are a couple of different questions that they ask because one of the legal factors is we don't want to give money to organizations that are no longer in operation. Know your grant level because you will be asked that. Know your NAICS/NTEE code. Have figured out the email and cell phone number. This is a really big one. When you apply, one of the things that you have to do is verify your bank account. There is a system called PLAD. It is a process that you have to complete during the application. You cannot submit your application until this is completed. The tricky thing is PLAD is going to want you to have the login credentials, the password and username to get into your online banking for the organization's bank account. This is not anybody's personal bank account. This is the organization's bank account. If there are multiple bank accounts with the organization, then you want the one where this grant is going to be deposited. So make sure you have that before you start the application. Sometimes there are certain banks that this system has trouble connecting with. So it's a good, and if that's the case, if PLAD can't find your bank, sometimes smaller banks, community banks will have a problem. In that case, what they're going to do is tell you to upload your two most recent bank statements. So if you have not been through the process with Industry before and know that your bank goes very easily through PLAD, then I would suggest it's a good idea to have these at your disposal. Because again, with not-for-profits, frequently whoever has the bank statements is not necessarily the person who's going to be completing this grant. If you are that small organization that does a 990 in, make sure you have your RRF1 ready as a PDF. Okay, next. Okay, the biggest advice I can give you, go to the program website, download the application guideline, and spend some time going through every page of it. This includes every question you're going to be asked on the application and a picture of the screen that you will be dealing with. There's not a demo that you can go through, but every question is there. You can see exactly what it all looks like and prepare yourself. Do so. It's a new thing that some of these Cal OSBA funds are being readily accessible to nonprofits and fiscally sponsored. This is great, but new things come with glitches. And so as you go through the application, you're going to find some things that don't directly apply to not-for-profits. Like there's a question in there that says, are you a for-profit? Are you a not-for-profit? There are a number of the demographic questions that say, like women-owned, veteran-owned, just in your mind, substitute led. We know that nobody is owned. We know that there are not owners involved. Take a deep breath, make those adjustments for yourself. These again are data questions. So in terms of, is it woman-owned? Is it woman-led, disability-led, those sorts of questions, you can determine what for you means led. Is that your board president? Is that your executive director? Is that the preponderance of your board or your senior staff? These are demographics that they're trying to get a feeling for who's receiving these funds. There are not specifically right and wrong answers, other than obviously don't make up the answers. Let's see. Some of these questions can be very personal and can cause people concern about personal identity, about potential identity theft. I get it. I understand it. Unfortunately, we live in a world where fraud and not everybody is nice. And so we have the conflicting issues here of our organizations and our individuals involved in them being concerned about identity theft. The state and Cal OSBA and Lindustry are also extremely concerned about people trying to commit fraud. The sad reality is this program will receive many applications from people who are just trying to get the money, regardless of whether or not they are eligible for it or are in any way related to being eligible for it. So the state and Lindustry have to take steps to try to prevent fraud. The individual needs and concerns that we all have and these fraud prevention steps sometimes butt each other in the head. Be patient. If you have questions or concerns, I've got this communication and I'm not sure if this is legit, don't hesitate to either call the Lindustry call center or send me an email and I can let you know. Yes, Persona is a company that is involved in this. Yes, you're going to be getting these communications. Okay, next. Where to apply? You're going to go to the Cal Nonprofits PerformingArts.com website. Select apply. This will not be active, the apply portion, until July 13th at 9 a.m. And as I said, this website has lots of good resources. Go get the application guideline, download it, read it. Next. The first thing that you're going to do is set up your access to the portal. If you have worked with Lindustry on a grant in the past, this is a brand new program. Nothing that you've done before impacts this program. So you have to set up a new account. You can use your previous email. You can use your previous cell phone number, but you're going to approach this like it's brand new. And that applies to everything with this grant. We've had a lot of people ask, well, if I already did a grant, can't they use those documents? No, this is a brand new program. Everything that is asked, you have to supply fresh. If you have received grants in the past, like the California Relief Grant or the California Venues Grant, that has no impact, either positive or negative, on this grant process. They are three completely separate programs. Again, as I said before, the phone number that you put in has to be able to receive texts. Every time you go into the portal, you will get a text message with a code and you have to use that confirmation code. If the person that has this email and cell phone number leaves your organization, make sure the information stays with you. If that is happening and it's a person's personal cell phone, call Lindustry immediately and have them help you change over the phone number. Okay, next. Let's go again. I don't know. There we go. When you go to start, you're going to either complete the application as a fiscal sponsor for a sponsoree, or apply for my own nonprofit. If you are a fiscal sponsor and you're applying now for the fiscal sponsors organization as opposed to a sponsee, then you're applying for your own nonprofit. Okay, next. Next. All right, we're not going to go through all of this, but I want you to see, this is what I was talking about. Every question is here, and then a screenshot that they've given you of what the application itself is going to use. Whenever it asks for the officer preferred phone number, anytime it asks for a phone number, you want to give them that cell phone. The fewer phone numbers that are involved here, the better. This first page in the fiscal, when a fiscal sponsor is applying, the first page is information about the fiscal sponsor. And these first informations are about the officer, the signee. So you don't want to include here the address for the organization. This is the address specifically for the signee. Okay, next. Now you're going to fill in information. No, can you go back one? There we go. For the business itself, for the not-for-profit. Again, don't worry if some of this doesn't directly apply and says, you know, for-profit instead of not-for-profit. Just fill in the information. If you're filling this, okay, now go on the next page. So this is the page that will not be in the just your own not-for-profit. The first two pages will be the same. This is the page for the fiscally sponsored organization, not the fiscal sponsor. When you are filling this out, there are going to be some things that the sponsee will not yet have, like an EIN, for example. If that's the case, fill in the information for the sponsor organization. These are the questions I said where they're asking here about employees. These are data gathering only. They will not affect your eligibility. Next. Okay, and these were the owned, just think led. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Okay, the last two big things, the persona verification. As I said, they want to know that the person who you've given the ID, etc., is physically there and is a real person. So the computer will take a picture. The best suggestion here is that the person from the organization with the information and the signer are both physically sitting in front of the computer together. We've had people ask about, you know, can't I sign in and out and then the other person signs in? The problem with that is there are elements within the system to prevent fraud. And if you're signing in and out specifically around this, it is very likely that you may be flagged for fraud, that they'll think you're up to something. So the strong recommendation is that you are both there in front, or that you supply the signer with all of the information they need. But again, I would not use the signee's personal cell phone. Have that be somebody in the organization that is going to be monitoring it. Next. Then you're going to go through the bank information. You have to complete this during the process. So have that information ready that we talked about before. Next. This is where you're going to upload your documents. If you have trouble on the day of, and for some reason the system just hates your 990 or your bank account statement or something and just will not upload, make a PDF, explain what's going on, and upload that. You have to upload certain of these documents in order to be able to submit your application. If there is something weird about your document that you feel like you want them to know before they read, then add a note, put the whole thing into one PDF, make sure you stay under the size limitations, and then upload them here. Next. We've already talked about all that. Next. Before you submit, you have an opportunity to go back and review. It will give you a red flag. Can I please? Yes, we will do that. I've been asked to repeat the information about the cell phone. You have to have a cell phone and an email address to set up the portal and to be the contact informations. You want to make sure the cell phone and the email address are something that is accessible to whoever in the organization is going to be responsible for overseeing this grant through the application process. If Lindustry calls and says, you know, we can't read your 501c3 letter, can you submit a new one? Then you want that email and cell phone to be something that is monitored by the person who would do that. Okay, so before you submit your application, review it. If the system thinks there are problems, it will give you a red flag and say, look at this. But this is your opportunity, and you can go back and edit each section. So do so. Look over it, edit it. Once you have submitted, you can go back. If you suddenly realize, oh my God, I thought our income was $1,000 and really it's $100,000. I realized I had fat fingers. After you submit, you can call Lindustry at the call center and have them reopen the portal. It's just much more complicated. So take a moment, look at everything, make sure you have filled everything out accurately. The other thing that you want to do is you are not going to have, it's not going to save as a PDF. You're not going to have the opportunity to print this. If you want to keep a record for yourselves, as you normally would of a grant you're applying, then do it here before you submit. Do a screenshot of each one, you know, do a screen print, but you will not be sent back along with your confirmation a copy of your application. Okay, next. Oh, and as you're going through, you can save and come back later to complete things. It's just you don't want to do that really during the persona portion. But you know, if you're going along and you realize, oh, I forgot to look at my, you know, my 2020 revenue, you can save out and then come back later and complete. All right, next. This is just telling you that you're going to get an answer from Lindustry that you've submitted. Next. Okay, the review process. The review process, go ahead next. The review process is going to go through a few stages. First, it's going to just look and see, is there something physically filled out and put in every hole that has to be? And you may get something that says you've met the minimum eligibility requirements. Understand that does not mean you're going to get a reward. That just means that so far you've actually written at least your name in every box. Then they will go through and actually review the information. You'll then get information about getting a W-9 probably and DocuSign and that sort of thing. So you're going to have multiple communications until they say to you, your grant has been awarded. Up until that point, it hasn't been. So don't get confused by verification, those kinds of words. That doesn't necessarily mean you've been funded. Okay, next. I think now we're to the point. Next. So if you take nothing else with you from this, the California Arts website that has lots of program information, the call center, the website for the program where you're going to apply, and that has lots and lots of good resources, and then my email address. Email is much easier and quicker for me to respond to than phone usually. Also, the thing I like about email is that you then have a written copy of the answer that I'm giving you. If I'm absolutely happy to talk to anybody on the phone, I'm just telling you those two things as a pointer, because emails I can respond to at 2 o'clock in the morning. But also, like I say, I really like email communication because that way you have information to look back at and there's less likelihood of confusion. So let's go to the Q&A. Rael, do you know how we're doing, or Patrice, in terms of answers in the Q&A?
Patrice has pretty much answered everything in the Q&A.
Oh, she's a rock star, isn't she?
Really, really is. I couldn't even get to it before her. She was just.
Okay, so is there any questions that people have that you either haven't put in or feel like you didn't get the answer that you want to, let's put them in now. And see, okay, I see I have 2 people with their hands raised. Yulia and Alexandra King. And I know both of you. Hello to both of you. Can you guys go ahead and just put into the Q&A now your questions? Brielle, was there anything that came up a lot in questions that you think I should cover?
I think the main thing was just understanding that your 990 is in the year 2019 is the most important document needed because it clarifies your status. It clarifies what category you fall into. So I think the main thing is, I think people just want to feel a sense of understanding that they're eligible.
Perfect. And the things to remember on the 990, some of the common questions. You want to upload your entire 990, all of the attachments, all of, everything that is prepared and submitted to the government. That's what you want to submit here. The other thing is to make sure that that is a clean copy, that they can read all of the pages, that, it doesn't, you haven't like marked on it or anything like that. Remember 2 things. 1, you're trying to make the case and you're wanting to make it as easy as possible for the reviewer to understand your organization. One of the examples I like to give to people is those of us who work in the arts, almost all of us have probably spent most of our adult lives trying to explain to our family and friends what we actually do for a living. Well, remember that when you're doing this, these reviewers are not necessarily familiar with your organization, familiar with the performing arts. So make the life as easy as possible for them. And also remember, they have to be on the lookout for fraud. So anything that looks like it could possibly be fraud is going to send up red flares. So make sure the things that don't scratch something off on the 990 and write something else in. Don't do anything like that that's going to set off, red flags for people. We seem to be clear at this point, hopefully, on that you are not required to have employees. Let's just see. Patrice, is there anything else specific that you think I should go back over?
There's some people who have some questions. They want more explanation on who's eligible to sign. Okay. And questions about the statement of what is a business entity document? Is that the statement of information? I don't understand that question.
Okay.
Exactly what they're looking for.
The business entity document, I think, is back, and let's go with the simplest one first. I think that's in the required documents. Let's see if I can bring that up over here. So the person that can sign this document, this grant, because you are entering into a legal agreement for the organization. And so it has to be an officer of the nonprofit organization. There is a form called a statement of information that is filed every 2 years with the state that says to the state, for ArtSpace Inc., our officers who are legally allowed to enter into an agreement for us are Susie Jones, Debbie Jones, Jen Reed, and Vicki Scott. So Linda Stree needs to be able to go to that statement of information and say, you've said your signer on this document is Terry Ball. I go and look on the statement of information. Terry Ball is not an officer for your organization. Therefore, she can't sign legally this grant. So the signer, the person who is the officer that's listed in that first page. All of those things has to be someone who is on your statement of information. If you're a fiscally sponsored organization, then this all applies to the fiscal sponsor, not the fiscally sponsored organization. If it still is confusing, email me and we'll talk through it. One other very important thing that I forgot to cover specifically. These grants cannot go to someone who is not in good legal standing with the state. That means that you have to be in good standing with the Secretary of State with all your legal situation, and also with the Attorney General Registry of Charitable Trusts. There are times that people have a delinquency or an issue with one of these two things and their organization is not aware. Right now, today, before July 13th, go and look up your status on the Secretary of State website, and also go and look up your organization in the Registry for Charitable Trust and make sure you are not delinquent. Both of those things can be fixed, but they are extremely time consuming. That is much more time consuming to fix than your NAICS and NTEE situation.
And those links are all in the chat box.
Okay, so Yulia, just a minute and we'll take your question. Is there anybody else? Is there anything else going on, Patrice or Rael, that you think I should cover? We're at time. And I just want to make sure that we don't leave people feeling that their answers are in. So because we're at time, and before I take Yulia's question, I just want to say to everybody one more time, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. Keep my email. I will be available by email the day the application portal opens to field questions. The Lindustry call center is always there. And I hope that this information has been helpful. As we have said, everything that you've seen will be available through the Californians for the Arts website. And I can't say strongly enough, go to the Cal Nonprofits website, download the application and go through the application guidelines and go through it step by step. Okay, thank you all for coming. And anybody that needs to jump out can. And Eduardo, can you open Yulia's mic and let's hear what her question is? I don't know whether you have to unmute her or she does.
Here, let me look for her. Yulia,
yeah. She's
Okay.
one of the ones with the hands raised.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, Yulia, you should be unmuted. What's your question? Oh, and she's gone. All right, Yulia, email me. You know my email. Tom, can we unmute Tom? He also said that he had something he wanted to.
Tom Dante?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, you do need both names, don't you?
Okay.
All right. Okay, Tom, so what's your question?
Hi, thank you again for hosting this. This is super informative. So I left a question in the Q&A. Our organization is in San Diego. We were fiscally sponsored in 2019, but we became a 501c3 in February of 2020. I have all the required documents that you're asking for, including a 990 for 2019 and a fiscal sponsorship agreement showing that we were sponsored. So I feel right with all the required documents, but does this complicate our application? Should I be thinking about applying as a nonprofit, or should I be talking to our formal fiscal sponsor about applying?
Patrice, correct me if I'm wrong, but my recommendation, if you are at this point a 501c3 on your own, Tom, I would apply in that way. And when you upload your organizing document, I would include, so like either your articles of incorporation, whichever one of those, to establish that you were a thing in June of 2019. I would put your the fiscal sponsor agreement that was in existence as of June 1, 2019. I would put that there along with a note that explains the situation, because you can certainly accept the money on your own at this point. And that fiscal sponsor agreement and any other documents that you have that predate 2019 will establish that you meet that eligibility factor. But I would apply as your own not-for-profit at this point. Patrice, am I wrong?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, perfect. Anyone else? I can hang out longer if people have questions. There was someone who asked for my email address again. It's grantsmanager@californiansforthearts.org. Jamie, let's let Jamie speak.
Hi, I had a question that I'd been asking in the Q&A just about the necessity for fiscal sponsorship or not. I'm not sure if I used the function properly, but I'm beginning to, I think I've heard that it's the determination for needing a fiscal sponsor is if you're a 501c3 or not. Am I correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
If you are your own 501c3, then you do not need a fiscal sponsor. If you are not a full 501c3, then you do.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Alexandra, are you still here and have a question, or is your hand just still raised? All right. Let's unmute Alexandra for a second and see if she has a question.
Okay, unmute. Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. Okay, I just had dental surgery, so my mouth is a little bit. I'm just in the process of getting a fiscal sponsor, which makes it too late for me at this point. Is that correct?
That is correct. Unfortunately, the June 1, 2019 date is a hard date.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Before you hang up, if you were a nonprofit in 2019 and it dissolved in 2020 or 2021, then you could still apply with additional documentation. That's correct, Terry, right?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
Right, thank you. I'm not, so I guess I'm not eligible.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Is it possible to get a recording of the webinar? Yes, and also where the slides will be. Both of those things will happen, and they will be on the Californians for the Arts website. Go to, I think that if you go to the video library section, you can find them, but also I believe will be a link on the Nonprofit Performing Arts program page on the Californians for the Arts. And we will also send everybody an email with links. What do you mean to be individually reviewed? Every grant will be assigned, that they take the grant when you apply and make sure that you filled out all of the information and uploaded all the documents. Then it gets assigned to a human being who goes through your full grant and looks to see not only did you upload a document, but did you upload the correct document and does it answer the correct eligibility questions? That person will then contact you and work with you on a one-on-one basis if there are questions or issues. Sometimes there's an issue with the bank actually doing the verification and that kind of thing. But each grant is individually reviewed by a lovely human being from Lindustry. Okay, let's go ahead and mute Alexandra again. And then if there's nothing else, when we'll receive this presentation? By tomorrow. In the meantime, though, the application guide itself, not this specific presentation, but the application guide from which this is built is already available on the program website, the Cal Nonprofit Performing Arts Organization website. Thank you again, all. Oh, Lisa, we got one more slipping in under the, can we unmute Lisa? Rosalina Masico, you can find that on the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant Program website is where you can find the application guide with all of the pictures. All right, Lisa, what's your question?
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just had a very quick question.
Sure.
Is it possible to email you, but also to meet with you for 30 minutes? We're a small nonprofit. I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. We have one contractor employer and everyone else is on the board. Is that possible, or is that, if that's asking too much, I guess I could just email you my questions and thank you for your time.
You can email me your questions and we can set up a Zoom time.
Oh, you don't even know how much I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Going. All right. Thank you, everyone. As I say, we will compile all of these Q&As. If there's any answers that for some reason weren't done in the question, we will fill those out, and all of this information will be sent out to you and also posted on the Californians for the Arts website. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.